building. Welcome back to open session for the August meeting. Out of closed session, there's no reportable action. Let me read through other orders of the day. On orders of the day, item 1A, it was time certain for 11 o'clock. The applicant has requested deferral, so that disability hearing will not happen today. So it'll be a deferred item. Item 2.1A, Miguel Serrano requested for a service-connected disability a change of effective date from November 15th to January 29th, 2019. On the items, this is just listing. Is this listed 2 time certains? For 10:30.
Yes.
For item 5A, that's discussion action regarding the repayment of the workers' compensation offset for Danny Horning. 11:30 is the audit committee. This is a note. Because we did not have a quorum for our audit committee to happen today jointly with the police and fire audit committee, we're deciding to have the full board hear all of the items so we can actually action them. And the police and fire audit committee is going to join us for those items. And so their audit committee and our board meeting will be held concurrently for those items starting at 11:30. Other than that, under orders of the day, I'll request a motion to support the orders of the day.
Motion. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Onto the consent calendar, is there anything on the consent calendar that needs to be pulled for consideration?
Mr. Chair, I don't know if it's a pull, but I do want to remind you, board, in reference to item 2.7C, the 2020 scheduled board and standing committee meetings, we will follow up with an email, but please know your first meeting in January, which is usually the third Thursday of the month, is going to be the 4th Thursday of that month. We will follow up in 2020 in January to remind you, but for the first meeting of the year, it will not take place in the 3rd Thursday of the month, but the 4th.
Okay, so there's no comments, nothing pulled on the consent calendar. Is there anything else to consider on that? I'll entertain a motion on the consent calendar.
Motion to approve the consent calendar. Second.
Motion from trustee Chandra, second from trustee Castellano. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, thank you. On to item 3. I'd like to request a moment of silence for those who have served the city and have passed. Thank you. So I have just about 20 minutes to get to the 10:30 time certain. So what we'll do is just continue in order as we are. This is item 4A. This is an oral update from Brian Starr, Senior Investment Officer. Mr. Starr?
Good morning. I just have one thing to report. We have unaudited fiscal year performance data for the pension and healthcare trust. The pension fund returned 4.27% for the fiscal year, outperforming its benchmark that returned 3.93% for 34 basis points of outperformance. The healthcare trust returned 4.19% versus the benchmark return of 3.86%, resulting in 33 basis points of outperformance. It was a year characterized by 2 very different quarters, the 4th quarter of 2018, where equity markets fell sharply, and the 1st quarter of 2019, where equity markets rallied strongly, and the plan performed in those periods as we would expect relative to our peer group that many people pay attention to. In the 4th quarter, of course, down market, we outperformed many of our peers, and subsequently in an up market in the 1st quarter, we underperformed many of our peers. Most notably, one of our perhaps pain points in previous years was our hedge fund allocation. Lots of concerns about performance there. That asset class actually returned to 7.67% during the fiscal year. So in a period of volatility, it performed well. Since the end of the fiscal year, we've experienced more volatility. The S&P 500 is down roughly 3% versus June 30th. The yield curve has flattened, with the 10-year yield reaching about 1.53% today. So, with a period of volatility coming, that should be positive for the plans.
Any questions for Mr. Starr? Okay. Mr. Starr, do you think we can get through item 4B by 10:30?
You can certainly try.
Okay, because I have a 10:30 time certain I'd like to get through if I can. So this is so it's the end of item 4A, on to item 4B. This is the discussion on the calendar year 2018 investment fee report presented by staff.
So
Good morning.
We actually have a handout. So my colleague David is handing out some handouts of a presentation to go along with the report that's been posted. So this is the fourth report that we're going to present on our annual fees covering the calendar year 2018 period. This is a unique report because it covers a comprehensive view of all the investment fees that we pay to investment managers, as well as the cost of running our investment program. David was the one that compiled this report, so I'll turn it over to him to talk through this presentation.
Great, thanks, Anesh. So everyone should already have the longer fee report, but we decided to put together a couple slides to highlight some of the key takeaways. The overall report has a lot of numbers, a lot of words, so hopefully we can cut through that and just hit on some salient points here. So if you'll turn to page 2. So here we just have the top line kind of takeaway. Chart on the left shows total fees since we've been collecting the data for the past 4 years, since 2015. One thing to note is that we only started collecting operating expenses starting last year. So the top level fee is not necessarily comparable from 2015, 16 compared to 2017 and 18. So you can see that overall fees have fallen a little bit, roughly call it 9 basis points, mainly due to decline in management fees as well as incentive fees. On the right here, we're trying to get a sense of comparative analysis, what our peers look like, what the universe looks like. I think in the past we've stated that this data is very difficult to collect, and one source is using CAFR data. But then that data is a little suspect in some cases, and usually reports just billed management fees. But that being said, you can take a look, and we are kind of middle of the pack. We've been consistently middle of the pack, so nothing new to report from a relative standpoint here. So turning over to page 3. So we just wanted to just quickly put a dollar number on what this 9 basis point reduction is, and that's about 1.2 million in savings from a fee perspective for the plan. By the way, just a note, we're just focusing on the pension data. The pension plan, we can talk about the healthcare plan if anyone has any questions, but the healthcare plan fees have been relatively stable, and it's mainly passive. So turning to page 4, we just kind of put this here to kind of highlight the fact that asset management fees are pretty much driven by asset allocation. But however, our goal is not necessarily to minimize fees, but to optimize fees for the chosen strategy and manager. Our main goal is to maximize risk-adjusted net returns, which is obviously helped by increasing the fee efficiency ratio. So on the table here is just kind of going through a couple of levers that we have to improve our fee efficiency. On the first column, kind of a general strategy type. I mean, here you're talking active or passive, and I think we generally try and be thoughtful in terms of, with respect to asset class, in terms of do we go active or passive. Usually, if we believe an asset class is a little bit more efficient, we'll probably look to have more passive exposure, and vice versa. So, for example, U.S. large cap equity, primarily passive. The second column is just type of fund. I think ideally we'd all like to put everything in separate accounts. They're usually cheapest, and you actually own your securities. But some cases you aren't able to do so. Next is one of the more important ones, fee structure. I think we've had certain cases where we're able to lower our management fee by negotiating a lower base management fee in exchange for additional performance fee with a cap. So we will end up, paying a lower fee usually, but then we'll, pay more if, the manager adds incremental value. And lastly, in terms of liquidity and size, I think in the past we've been able to get lower fees by agreeing to longer lockup terms. So, turning over to page 5. Now here we can dig into the numbers a little bit more. And, I think the point here, and one of the points we want to drive home is, we think that the board should focus more on management fees than total fees. So the concept here is just basically control what we can control. And you can see from the first page how incentive fees are very volatile and inherently unforecastable, and you really don't have a sense of what they will be from year to year. But management fees, are obviously set, and you can control it. Or what they're going to be through your asset allocation, as well as the various other levers that we highlighted in the previous page. So over the last 3 years, we've been able to the plan's management fees have gone down from 82 basis points to 73 basis points, which equates to roughly about $400,000 in savings. Flipping over to the next page, on page 6, we kind of took a look at what's driving management fees. And the chart on the left, it's clear that most of the management fees come from active strategies. No surprise here. And by active, we're including private strategies, hedge funds, long-only public securities. So one of the reasons why they've come down is, you can see on the right, is our allocation to more passive strategies. We've gone from 42 to 43% over the last 3 years, and more specifically 41 to 43 in the last year. The numbers might look small, but for example here, this increase in weight of about 2% accounted for 1 out of the 4 basis point decrease in management fees. So turning over to page 7, we're digging a little further into the main contributors of these active management fees, and we kind of broke them down again to kind of public, private, and hedge strategies. So you can see public makes the smallest, and kind of it's pretty similar between hedged and private, with hedge contributing the most. So another driver of why management fees has come down is our reduced allocation to absolute return and or hedge strategies, as well as a little bit of restructuring within the bucket of hedge strategies in itself. So the management fee itself within that bucket has come down, as well as the allocation to those strategies within the plan. And finally, on page 8, this is kind of breaking it down a little bit more in terms of what exactly do we mean by hedge strategies. You can see the bulk of it is from absolute return bucket, followed by global equity, fixed income, and real assets. And we expect in 2019 to have exited all the, we have actually exited all the hedge strategies as it pertains to real assets and fixed income. And as a result of our recent strategic asset allocation shift in October, we brought down absolute return from 11% to 7%. And that should drive management fees further lower to about, we estimate about 70 basis points in 2019, which we kind of feel is within the vicinity of our long-term target. So that kind of concludes the presentation that we have. Open to any questions.
Open the floor for comments or questions. Please.
On page 2, the
Yes.
peer comparison
Mhm.
chart. Can you talk about, please, that cohort? How large is that? I see you've got labels, but there are obviously more peers than what's reflected in the label. Where does the peer group come from? How large is it?
Yeah, so you can see here it's about 42 U.S. public plans and California plans. And I believe it's, we just took the available data from, public pension.
Public pension plan database. And these actually mainly cover $3 to $10 billion pension plans, as well as some larger ones like CalPERS, CalSTRS, so that there's additional comparisons, but similar size plans, California focused in general.
So other than PERS and STRS, it's plans with about the same asset?
Correct.
Same. Thanks.
And Joe, I'd like to make a comment on that. Obviously, let me start by emphasizing what you have on page 4, which asset allocation is the main determinant of fees. Having said that, this table is representative of what, something that we have said year after year when we present this report, which is, you see where we stand in comparison to our peers. Now, again, granted, asset allocation is the #1 determinant, but my point here is, you see where we stand, and then you see the total fee report. So if you look at 2018, we stand somewhere between the 40 and 60 basis points, but the total expense ratio is 1.17. I will argue that many of these plans, again, given the difference in terms of asset allocation, they're underreporting their fees, because this is, again, based on the CAFRE, which are management fees when you get an invoice, but doesn't really include the comprehensive expenses that we include in total spend ratio. So that always have to be kept in mind when we speak in public about our peers. No, I'm not saying that I would expect them to be in the 1.2%, but I certainly would expect them to be higher than what they show in the CAFRE's comparison.
But our number is showing less than 1.17% as well. I've seen this chart before. I always find it's hard to reconcile. Assuming you're taking from the CAFR, usually people reporting CAFR is gross fee and net fee. The variance becomes this data.
So on the CAFR, the total fees and the difference between net and gross, that's only based on what the custodian observes, either through invoices that have been paid for management fees or directly on statements that the custodian bank is able to record. So similar to other plans, it doesn't capture everything. There's cases where managers deduct fees directly from funds, and those aren't included on statements. Those would not be captured. So it's a similar case for both our plan as well as other pension plans that report CAFR data.
So this data, so I'm trying to get some clarity. So this is purely based on the CAFR reporting, the variance between the reported gross fee return and the net fee return.
Correct.
You deduce the difference will be the fee expenses, but it doesn't capture everything.
Correct.
Okay. So I just feel that this data, although provides some comparison, is really doesn't provide a very good comparison. It should be taken as with a grain of salt for the look, not for really comprehensive fee analysis purpose.
Well, I was going to say, at least starting last year, we don't have to rely on CAFRs anymore. Every system has to report under AB 2833 to the state. So we really ought to be looking at that as the database now, because there's a uniform reporting now that will capture the things that don't appear in the CAFRs. Might be worthwhile looking at the 2018, which is the first full year that it's been in place, and starting to use that as the database instead of looking at CAFRs, because as Mr. Pena says, CAFRs are really subject to a wide range, but the AB 2833 reports should have much more uniformity to them and disclose much more.
One comment on the AB 2833, so the limitation there is that it's for alternative investments only, so it wouldn't include other types of passive active strategies, as well as it only captures funds that were contracted on or after January 1st, 2017. So there's some cases like our plan where we're able to go back to prior funds and capture that data, whereas other plans may not be including that. So it's not quite apples to apples yet, but agreed, it's a better comparison.
Almost everyone that I know is including not just the alternatives in their reports, but it's worth taking. That's a good point. It's worth taking a look at.
Well, and to Trustee Sun's point is that if you have another chart that has, this is the AB.
2833.
That one, if you have those numbers as well as a secondary comparison, again, this is a comparison, there's another comparison, and again, you read through multiple things, multiple slices or lenses will provide insight. Anyone else have I have a couple.
I do have one, because I think the rationale behind this peer comparison table it was really actually a request that I had. It was not really to be taken as a comparison with the CAFRs, with other systems expenses. It was more because whenever we went to present in public, stakeholders will bring back comments of how much higher we are compared to our peers, because what they were looking at were CAFRs. So the point of this table is not for us to say, hey, look how we compare to our peers. It's like, hey, look at what we are and look at what our CAFR is. I don't think our peers are much different than that. So I think the AB 2033 is not quite there yet, but it's probably a better comparison. This table is not to say that we should compare ourselves to our peers. It's to say we are on our CAFR about 50% of the total fees. Again, fees are based on asset allocation, but the message to the stakeholders is, I don't think it's fair that you compare our report to the CAFRs and everybody else. That's really the point of this table, not to use this table as the table that we want to use to compare our total fees to everybody else. It was to say, we know they are underreporting, not because they do it purposely, that's because they don't have the kind of expense ratio report that we produce. But keep that in mind when you compare us to those numbers. That was the purpose of that table.
So my comments are this, a couple things. One, if you're going to present a presentation that's based on a report, all of these same charts need to be in the report as well, so that we can look at both of them. This should be a summary or an excerpt from this, as opposed to just taking tables and data tables and putting them in chart format. It's hard for us to go back and forth to kind of balance what we read before versus this and kind of align everything. Year to year, they should be similar. If we're doing peer comparisons here, regardless of what the purpose is, we should track these through the multiple reports in which we're tracking peer comparisons, so they're all of the same peers. So if we're tracking how we're doing for administrative expenses in our budget planning, these should be the same peers we're looking at as for performance as well. So if we're reporting them there and making sure that it doesn't look like you're cherry picking which peers you're trying to compare to as you go through multiple reports. So that if we look through over the course of a fiscal year as we're reporting different things, if these are the peers you're saying are relevant here, why are they not relevant, or are they relevant in the other category? And just be cognizant of that, of choosing which peer comparison. So one is more operational in the sense that your presentations should be in line exactly with what's in the report, and therefore it's just excerpts from that. And so I'd ask for them to be kind of included so that they're really just a brief summary, more of the executive summary of what's in the more detailed report. Makes it easier for us to kind of digest and make sure we're on track with what you're saying. And then finally, I think it's remarkable work to try to present this information. I look forward to this being presented before the City Council in the aggregated sense with the police and fire data as well, so that we have the full comprehensive fee concept. And if we could have any other comparisons of the full reports that you have as this information, I think is very important. It's if there's only this handful of funds that are doing this full reporting, but also CalPERS, CalSTRS, they have massive staffs that are investing internally, so likely they have less costs and fees on those investments. And so that sort of description in that presentation is pretty relevant, I think. But the work it's good work. I appreciate it all. Looks to see if this 2833, now remembered, is a valiant database to reference as well. And this will be the last one I see. Other comments or questions?
I just wanted to add to your comment, these peers are the same peers that we use for administrative expenses and everything else, because there are California plans that are within the same size of fund, so that's why we try to keep them the same.
Great, and then all that comparison, if it's not in your report as well, it's kind of basically then it's two reports. Because again, and that should be in the footnote, these are the ones we compared to and for our budgetary things as well.
Okay.
Other comments or questions on this? Got one final one, when's this going to council?
We're still working on that. We're gonna be going to Police and Fire on September 5th. So I suspect we're gonna be going to council towards the end of September. I know there's a meeting that they don't want too many items because I forget which day that is, but most likely it's gonna be the last meeting of the month, but I'm not, that day hasn't been scheduled yet.
I think September 24th is the light agenda.
Is it light agenda?
I think it is.
Okay.
But- Just saying. Okay, we need to accept this, I presume, or is it just a presentation?
It's just a presentation, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
That's the end of item 4B. Just for note, I've been asked to kind of enunciate beginning and end so the transcribers can make this, they're recording this, and they'll be putting these things online and the cast later on. So they've asked to be a little bit more explicit about transitions. So on to item 5A, this is our time certain, I'm only 4 minutes late. Discussion and action regarding the repayment of the workers' compensation offset for Danny Horning. We have an attachment here, and staff is present. Do we have a staff presentation, I presume?
Yes,
We
we
did.
have
Please.
an introduction. Come on in, please.
Go ahead, please.
So this is Mr. Horning.
1 minute, so staff will present first, then I'll ask for a public
Sure.
comment. Please.
Good morning, my name is Catherine Schaefer. I'm the Division Manager for the Office of Retirement Services. There was an overpayment to the member created in December 2016 when the board approved a change in status for a service-connected disability for Danny Horning. Mr. Horning had been receiving workers' compensation payments since July 2014, and he had service retired in July of 2016. When approved for a service-connected disability, his disability was retroed back to July 31st, 2014, and then changed to July 10th of 2014, which was the date he had originally applied for disability. Municipal Code 3.28.1040 says, in the event a member is retired for a service-connected disability pursuant to Part 10 of this chapter and receives both a service-connected disability retirement allowance and a workers' compensation benefits for temporary disability, permanent disability, or vocational rehabilitation temporary disability pursuant to Division I or Division IV of the California Labor Code, then the service-connected disability retirement allowance shall be offset by the sum of all workers' compensation payments. The recommendation of staff is that Mr. Horning repay principal and interest in accordance with a repayment plan approved by the board. Mr. Horning has submitted a proposal to repay $17,700 of the principal due with no associated interest.
Okay, anybody from the board have questions of the staff? Okay. I'm assuming public comment, so would you like to address the item? And
Well, I represented, or our firm represented Mr. Horning's workers' compensation case.
can you introduce yourself, please?
Mason Bledsoe.
Thank you, Mason.
My father represented him, but either way, it's our firm.
Mr. Bledsoe, then.
Yes.
Perfect. That'll be accurate both ways.
So, I don't think we have any dispute about 33.28.1040. I think we agree on that. However, Section 6 of that municipal code section says that the offset does not apply with respect to workers' compensation benefits paid for any injury or illness which did not cause or contribute to the disability for which a service-connected disability was granted. Now, he filed multiple workers' compensation claims. They paid him on a 2014 claim that was later determined to be, and I have a printout from the workers' compensation people showing he got paid, and I also have emails showing when we settled the claim that it was agreed that 2014 actually never caused any disability. All of his disability was caused by his 2011 claim, and he was retired because of his 2011 claim. The payments that they want to take credit for were not due to the injury that he retired for, and therefore this section shouldn't allow an offset.
Okay,
May I respond?
please.
Okay.
Information.
The report that determined Mr. Horning's disability through the board, there was a report by the medical advisor, Dr. Tierman, and she clearly states in her report that the 2011 right wrist injury is a contributing factor to the service-connected disability being granted. So the payment is subject to offset both the 2011 and the 2014 injuries because they were both factors and contributors to the granting of the service-connected disability. Let's see, sorry, I'm reading notes as I'm going, because I'm actually reading an email between Robert Bledsoe and our staff previously.
It might have been mine, but either way.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so that's our stance, is that both injuries went into Dr. Tierman's decision and the board's final decision to grant the disability.
Well, the thing is, the 2014 money, that, you could argue about what your guys' offset is, but the 2014 money, that wasn't paid on the 2011 injury, and there's a printout from the city. I don't think that can be disputed now, that the money that you want credit for was paid on the 2014 injury. The question is, did the 2014 injury cause any disability? The city attorney's office agreed in the settlement that it did not, and the doctor said it did not. And if that didn't cause any disability and that wasn't why he was retired, then you wouldn't get credit for that 2014 money. In fact, when you looked at the settlement, all the money was paid out before he retired, or almost all of it was. At the very least, if you wanted to do an equitable resolution here, you should count it from the 2011 payments up so they only get credit for the little bit of money that of the award after, because the payment started in like 2013. They only get credit for at least only part of it then.
We are separate from workers' compensation, and Dr. Tierman found that the two claims were related and that they were contributing factors to the disability that was granted here, not to the workers' compensation payment.
There was an incident in 2014 that the workers' comp people did, and the doctors evaluated it. In the incident in 2014, they found to be not a new incident, but actually the same thing as before. And that was why, it's not that he didn't have something happen then, it's that it was all found to be originally caused there. And you have a situation where the benefits were paid on the wrong claim. And there isn't any reason to take the offset here. And if you want to do something like that and say, well, then he got extra money from the city or something like that on a claim that he shouldn't have gotten, and then an equitable thing to do would be to take just the money after the retirement happened and the permanent disability advances that were paid beforehand, not take those. That'll mean a lot less money should be requested by your side. And there shouldn't be interest or something like that. Mr. Horning did nothing wrong in this thing here. He went with what the AME that the city agreed to, and he got those benefits there. He did nothing wrong. For sure, he did nothing wrong.
So this, well, just a second, so certainly this is confusing to us. And so we'll help suss this out, and if we need to get more information, we'll seek more information before we decide for sure. Mr. Pena, and did you just say, Mr. Leaderman?
You were gonna ask some questions?
Well, if I may just help the board clarify, because I'm not sure I quite understand
Me neither, that's why I was
the
ahead.
dates. So with the board's permission, I'm Harvey Leaderman, outside counsel to the board. May I just try to break down what you
Sure.
said about the injuries, because it's not clear to me from the record, so it would be helpful to have representation from you as to this. There was an injury in 2011.
Yes.
Workers' comp paid for that injury?
Yes.
What was that injury?
Right wrist.
Right wrist,
Yes.
okay. That's 2011, there were payments for that.
Yes.
Was there a 2014 injury?
There was an incident in 2014 that the doctors determined was not a new injury, it was all the 2011, so he claimed
Relating
one.
to the right wrist?
Yes,
And he got payment for that?
yes.
And if I may ask of Catherine on staff, is it in our record that Dr. Tierman found that the right wrist was a contributing factor to the service-connected disability, to the incapacity?
The body parts that the board approved for the disability were a right shoulder and right wrist.
Okay. Oh, and these two payments made in 2 separate years, all related to the right wrist injury?
That was what was later determined by the AME and then workers' comp case.
And that was determined by Dr. Tierman to be a contributing factor to the permanent incapacity?
Correct.
Okay.
What I might say.
Does that help clarify?
The timeline of it, yes.
What I wanted to say is that I don't think I have a copy of Tierman's report, but I suspect she did not discuss whether or not the 2014 incident was a new injury or a recurrence of the 2011 incident, a consequence of it. I suspect that wasn't discussed in that report, but the city did, and I have emails from the, and I can present to you guys if you want, emails from the city council that agreed all the disability came from the 2011 injury and nothing came from 2014.
I'll reserve comment till you get all the evidence in.
Okay.
Thank you, counsel. I mean, you were a lot more eloquent than I would have been, but those are the questions that I was considering asking. I'm a little confused by your statements that it was a different event.
Yes.
I think from the, and maybe this is why we are confused, I think the way we read, and I'll defer to counsel, the code section of the mini code has to do with the fact that for the payment to be requested back or to be offset when a member is found to be disabled from the retirement standpoint, it has to be that they're found to be disabled from the same disability as the workers' comp. And I think that you answered that both of those payments are related to the right wrist, which is one of the contributing factors to the decision by this board to grant the disability. Therefore, I can't speak to, and I don't even know exactly what you're referring to some statements by emails or letters from the city attorney's office and whether or not they're part of the disability, but both payments are related to the right wrist, which to our understanding, because they're both related to the right wrist, then we need to offset the payment of the service-connected disability with the payments received for workers' comp. That's the way I understand it. That's the simple version. You may have a lot more detail to add, but I just wanted to kind of summarize it the way I understand it so far.
So let me explain. He got benefits for the 2014 injury. Turned out, those benefits were probably by mistake. Those benefits he shouldn't have received on the 2014 injury. He should have received the benefits already in 2011, and that should have happened. That's what was resolved in the case. Yes, he got benefits, and in some regard, they were due to the first injury and not the second injury, but the city is requesting benefits on an injury they didn't get benefits for, because that's how the benefits were categorized. Do you understand?
No, I don't, actually. I mean, I hear what you're telling me. I
So
understand
they
what you're
paid
saying.
him.
I just can't
They paid
match.
him on the 2014 claim, which was later determined to be no claim at all. And
Did he pay that money back?
no, he didn't pay that money back. It was resolved, they got credit for the money they paid there on the 2011 injury later on, but it was resolved. But the time period you're talking about is the time period he got the money on the 2014 injury when he should have received it on the 2011 injury. And to the extent he got money on that injury, that the municipal code doesn't give you an offset for that. And to the extent this is a strange situation where you have this doesn't happen all the time, it happens sometimes, but it doesn't happen all the time. I would request that you do some kind of equitable arrangement with him, because he did nothing wrong. He went through with everything just like he was supposed to, and paying interest, he lives, this is all of his income, so this is a big hardship for him.
So, no, I understand. And maybe, as the chair indicated, maybe there's further discussion to be held here. But I do want to mention for the board benefit that when we work these cases, the amount that we are looking to offset actually come to us from workers' comp. We don't prepare that amount. Workers' comp understand this code section as well, and that amount came to us from workers' comp. So it sounds like if there is an issue here, it may be an issue between the member and yourself and workers' comp, because we are going to be working off the workers' comp amount that is determined by them, and that's the amount that they gave us. Is that a fair statement?
That is very correct.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I do have I can show you the settlement document, which says it was all due to the 2011 injury and not due to the 2014 injury. And I can show you, in fact, the agreement by the city attorney that it was all due to the 2011, not to the 2014 injury.
So, I guess just to officiate the process a little bit, this makes it hard for us to understand all the details without all the documents in front of us. Again, I know you can present them right now, but we're best prepared if we're reading this stuff ahead of time and
Fair
thinking this thing through. You have so I have a couple of questions. You have a settlement agreement already with the city that happened on something else?
The case is resolved. It's all been done. He's been retired for many years.
When was that resolved?
That's the kind of thing I should know, but I don't remember.
I mean, is it last year or two, or is it back in
No,
2014?
like, I want to say like 4 or 5 years ago.
In 17, I received the retroactive disability.
That was when he got retirement. When did we settle the workers' compensation claim?
Ish, I don't need the exact date, I'm just.
It was a few years ago for sure.
I mean, is it something that would have been in our disability packet already?
We do not get the workers' comp information. All we get is the list of payments.
So, I mean, again, if he was paid for something that he shouldn't have gotten paid for the workers' comp stuff, they would resolute that to us as far as something that would be some information over to us. It sounds like we didn't get all this information.
That was why I wrote
Personally,
the letter.
Personally, I'd like for the staff to go back and work with Mr. Horning to figure out and see if we have all of the relevant information. It seems like we only have some of it.
Okay.
I think we're gonna, and if you could put together a timeline of these things for us a bit, would be helpful. I know this is a big hairy case and it's challenging, and I'm sorry you were injured. But I think that we could figure this out. Harder things have been figured out, so we'll figure this thing out, and we'll do what's right by the plan and you, and we'll figure out the right plan forward. Is that fair? That you guys think differently?
Jim, I haven't let him talk at all. Do you have anything you want to say?
So, yeah, I just want to say that this stings. They didn't mention this wrist doesn't move at all. I had a left wrist injury in 97, and when I applied for disability, it took 2 years for them to settle with me, and there was no interest there. And before I got the settlement, I retired when I turned 55. I started collecting money, but for a couple of years I was getting no money. But I had to resign because I couldn't work no more. And I really thought all that money was due me. I didn't think I cheated anybody. And
You
the money was
definitely-
spent. And if I have to pay it back, I hope it's slow and with no interest.
Well, we'll figure that part out. I just don't think we have all the information as far as when relevant monies were supposed to be had and what code is applied, and we'll get guidance from council as to what rules we have. But I think we need some more information to make this decision. We have a retreat next month during our board meeting, so let's have this back in October. So if you both could work expeditiously to get all the information and get staff report back to us so we can make a decision in October. And I'll try to be not 4 minutes late the next time we have our hearing, and we'll set a time certain and get that thing resolved. Mr. Lieber.
If I may, through the chair, may I request that Mr. Horning and council provide at least 2 weeks before that October meeting,
Oh, yeah.
any material they want to have included in the record.
Yeah, if you would, please. Let's just make this a little more official, get everything kind of lined up. And if you can if you shoot for like the beginning of October at the latest to get anything to staff, but you should be working with them through September to get this thing tidied up so we can get all the information. So it helps us decide, we'll decide efficiently, hopefully in October.
Okay.
Work? Thank you. So that's the end of item 5A, with no action. On to item 5B, this is discussion action on the draft agenda for the September Federated Board Retreat. We'll lead this discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm just going to kick it off, but really, you have before you a memorandum after your board provided direction to staff and to trustees Sun and Castellano. We had 2 or 3, I believe it was 2 conference calls and various emails. So before you is the memorandum summarizing what was the result of those discussions, along with the second page, just as a reminder for you board, what were the items that you discussed in your phase 1 and 2 retreats that took place in 2017, as well as we included a draft agenda for your meeting. With that said, I'll just turn it over to trustees Castellano and Son so they can comment on the suggested topics for discussion at the retreat.
I'll take the first shot at it. So the second attachment in this agenda item is the draft agenda. And you can see that there's really three key topics. The first is an initial discussion about the bifurcation of Tier 1 to Tier 2. It would mean bringing in consultants to walk us through what are some key decisions that we need to make, and how do we get there in terms of Tier 1, Tier 2 bifurcation, and whether or not we do that. The pros and cons, and then to the extent we indicate a leaning, then what would be the process and the action steps to get there. So this would be an initial discussion. We're not suggesting that we were making a decision about Tier 1, Tier 2 bifurcation, but really putting information in front of us to determine whether or not we want to go down that road. The second item is to talk about our funded plan status, in anticipation that at some point the market will have a downturn. We've enjoyed a good market for the last decade, but at some point we know it's going to go through its cycle, and then how does our 51% funded status, how might that get impacted, and what might be our options for responding, reacting to the market downturn. And then item 3 is to establish, well, it's at the very least, to discuss a process for developing and approving an annual work plan for the budget for the board. It is the opportunity for the board to take a step back from our monthly meetings and take a look at a bigger picture. What are some key issues, and how do we codify that in terms of an annual plan, so that at the beginning of an annual period, we can say, here are our priorities, and then at the end of that annual period, we can say, here's how we did.
Okay, anything else you'd like to add to that, Trustee Sun?
No, I think Trustee Constantino said well.
Any thoughts? So I guess if you're kind of lining up organizationally, how the group would be is, what's interesting is one talks about benefits, but then also talks about the asset management of it. Is it the benefits or the asset management? Because the benefits have an actuarial thing, and the asset management is more of the consultant side, investment staff side. Is the conversation about a discussion on what Tier 2, Tier 1, Tier 2 on the benefit side, or is it on the asset side?
Oh, I'm sorry, I think there's a typo. I think the original language was a liability, not benefits. We
Yeah,
need to look at
it's the liability side of the equation.
Yeah.
Okay, it's still actuarial as
Yeah.
opposed to investment side.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a liability, because we need to look at, so the idea of, we had some conversation about Tier 1, Tier 2 for a while. The idea, the Tier 1, Tier 2 issue had been ongoing for a while. I know the board had some initial discussion probably back in 2017. With the increasing membership of Tier 2, I think it's time for us to take a look at the whole plan structure versus the tier membership, to see if it's still practical to keep all the keep concurrent assets commingled and managed in the same way to meet our obligations. Certainly, Tier 2 has a different obligations characteristics from Tier 1. And then I think first of all, we need to look at what's the situation between Tier 2 and Tier 1 versus the liability and asset side. We need to look at those, right? Then the second thing, is it feasible to separate them? And then if we determine if it's feasible, then we have to decide how.
Separate the assets here, Jane?
Yeah, well, the asset and liability go hand in hand together. You can't really talk about asset without talking about liabilities, right? And then the third one is, should we decide that it's feasible to separate, then how we do that? So that's why we, I said, discuss a we created the first topic to discuss a roadmap to potentially bifurcate in tier 1, tier 2 liabilities, and then when you bifurcate their liability, then you have to create a different asset management plan to meet those liabilities down the road. And then coincide with that, when we separate assets and liability, then fund status will come into discussion within the current market situation with the current market expectation. How are we supposed to align the asset management with the liability expectation to how that's going to impact it to the funded status for both tiers?
Okay. Mr. Lederman?
It's an observation, and maybe this is stating it just differently, but the same thing. It seems to me that the inquiry is focused on the difference between tier 1 and tier 2, in that the key difference is that tier 2, any unfunded liability is shared by the employees. So they have exposure and risk that is not characteristic of tier 1. At present, there is virtually nearly no unfunded liability associated with tier 2, and we're required for actuarial purposes to assess the liabilities of tier 2 separately from tier 1, so that we can determine contributions that are shared by the employees. So I think the question was a little more focused, as I understood it, which is there something we can do today when there is no unfunded liability in tier 2 to essentially immunize tier 2 from what we've had to go through in the last 2 decades with tier 1 with unfunded liabilities and not having collected enough in contributions and earned enough in investment earnings to avoid an unfunded liability. And so I don't know if bifurcation is the right word. I think what we're really talking about is there a methodology available that we should explore that would allow us to immunize, it will allow us to de-risk tier 2 so that we take advantage of the current state of affairs, that there is no unfunded liability, and we avoid an unfunded liability going forward. Is that what is essentially the focus of what is meant by this bifurcation examination?
Again, my comment was to be just, it's sort of implied an end by the way it's stated, as opposed to what the question is that we want to study. It's more of,
right,
explore this approach. Or it's not as explicit as that, but it certainly is leaning that way. And that's where I'm like you, I'm thinking a little bit that it should be a little more open-ended about, it's this next study of tier 1, tier 2, I think. We've done some in the past. I think Trustee Sutton is indicating that what action do we need to take, to your point? Or are there specific actions we need to take around tier 1 and tier 2? Is that
That's
right?
correct. I think, yeah, for my thought process is that when we look at the situation to see what we can do, and then how feasible it is, then the direction. That's
From one, so like I said, if the beginning is do nothing is one option, to a complete other extreme where you have wholly separated everything into the extreme of everything you would imagine. There's probably a continuum on there that's reasonable, that, what does that end up looking like as far as the optimal way for the plans? Is that, is it the study of that continuum? Or is it?
I would say, yeah, I would say.
Or is
yes,
it the
that's-
focus of, I think Mr. Lederman is slightly different than saying, how do we protect tier 2 so that basically what's going on with tier 1 doesn't happen to tier 2 in the future? What's the approach?
I think that's all related. We can't really say one thing versus the other. And then the fundamental I think the fundamental driver of this discussion is because we have increasing membership in tier 2. And then yet the tier 2 asset is managed the same way as a tier 1, but we don't have the same liability. We shouldn't be exposing to same level of risk as a tier 1 asset. So in a way, as we're trying to separate out how to manage the assets for each tier better to line with your liabilities. And then if it's possible, to the council said, if possible, I know tier 2 has a small amount of liability, it's a small amount on the liability, which is shared 50-50 by the member and the city. And if it's possible, can we shrink that on liability down the road? And then possibly having no on-fund liability for tier 2. I know tier 1 is high quality, we have hundreds, millions of that. But tier 2, if we can avoid that situation, no, that's really thinking generation, decades ahead of time.
So we have a model for this right now. We have a pension trust and a healthcare trust. They have different liabilities, and we manage them differently because they're in different trusts. We can manage them differently. We have a different asset allocation for the healthcare trust than we have for the pension trust. That's kind of a model for what I'm hearing that the board may wish to explore here. Obviously, that would take a statutory change to create a tier 1 trust and a tier 2 trust, like we have the pension trust and the healthcare trust. And that's not within the power of the board, but a study to develop the intelligence on what would that look like, how would that go about happening, sounds to me to be the focus that you're raising.
For the purpose of wording the agenda, I was intentionally trying to be very cautious about that because without suggesting that this is what we're going to do definitively, because this is a very substantive change if we were to go down that road, and there are a lot of stakeholders attached to it. I wouldn't want to get stakeholders riled thinking that we're going to go down a certain road preliminarily. So that for the purpose of the agenda, it was really more like what Chair Lesh was suggesting. It's really a viewing the possible landscape, the breadth of the continuum, the breadth of options that we might have available to us, and what are the pros and cons, how are stakeholders impacted or not impacted. It's really taking that first blush look at it so that then the board can react to that and maybe decide we want to get more outside reaction to it. But it's really that initial discussion, because there's no doubt there are different stakeholders within the plan, the tier 1, tier 2, and it does seem to warrant some consideration, especially as the tier 2 population is growing. So this, for the purpose of the retreat, this would be an initial discussion about what that might look like in the long run as that population grows, and if and when it makes sense to approach the asset and the investment side differently, separately.
Okay, lots of good discussion. Do we have a direction on that one as to what we should, because some of the wording on it indicates an outcome as opposed to the discussion. I like the idea of come up with a roadmap for it, for this review, whether it's really just develop a strategic plan around immunizing tier 2 is really what we're trying to do, I think. Is that?
That would be the ultimate outcome, I would say.
And so, and I think we gotta get, Chiron in here. I don't think we need our investment consultants in, but our investment staff can weigh in on implications of decisions if we made choices around pooling things differently, for sure, but so could Chiron have something prepared in a month?
Yeah, so
You queue them up for some kind of.
I reach out to Chiron and both Mikita, and they both have put tentatively this day on the calendar. They're just waiting for me to get back to them on what is the direction from the board on what you're looking for. I'm not sure. If you look at the second page, you touched base on this 2 years ago. I think this is just going to be, I don't want to see more of the same, but it's the same concept again, on tier one and tier two, you want to have more discussions about it. At that point, the first kickoff, you can call it elimination, you can call it decreased risk, but having more discussions about it. I think at the time, if you remember correctly, Cameron was very clear that we were, I don't want to say quite a few years away, but a few years away, somewhere in the second half of the 2020 decade, before this board was in a position to really having to do something about it. So again, I think having discussions to keep you apprised as to what the options are, because you have different options from, as you indicated, Mr. Chair, from not doing anything to a complete either different trusts or even just one trust but separate asset allocations. And so you just want to make sure that you're ahead of the curve with what are the implications, both of those tiers have different demographics.
Yeah, I don't think we've got, I don't remember the presentations getting to the other extreme of the continuum of the options and the opportunities and implications of that.
Not to that extent, no, they were
But I
just.
think we need to get there.
Yeah. Did you would like that on this one as well?
I think so. I think if we can have that, what is the full spectrum of options, really? And it was, I think before it was what kind of incremental steps can we do right now, or what ought we to be doing right now to set ourselves up for success, basically. As this continues to grow, it's not necessarily population size, it's the asset and liability growth that's really the challenge, not just the number of people.
Yes.
And so if we can set that up for success, if there's things, okay, great, within the next 2 years, within the next 5 years, we need to have the plan or plans positioned like this. Or we need to get a statutory request into city council to do this specific thing. That's not an instantaneous pivot that they could do. It takes election cycles to get that in front of them. And so we need to think through those things, so. Do you have an understanding of how to craft that agenda and what to get people in for that item?
Yes, I have an understanding. I will certainly, if you board direct me, I will certainly run it by both of the trustees that I've been working with to make sure that it capture what we all agree is the concept of it.
Mhm.
That's one item.
Yes,
So.
yeah, and that Chiron's on board to present.
Absolutely.
as
Chiron is
insights and
available.
Research and
Yes.
thoughts on it, great.
I think, I know you know this, but just to remind you, from the prior retreat, regarding the prior retreat, after November, Trustee Chandra will be the most senior person on the board with
Yes.
2 years?
Yeah.
2 years of tenure, so there's a lot of stuff that may have been discussed
This is what didn't happen
2 years
before.
ago.
Yeah.
That,
So I mean,
the rest of us
they
never
probably
heard
have to do a
before.
15, 20 minutes of
Yes.
breeze, Reader's Digest edition of what happened in 2017, and then let's go forward. And provide the documents, if there's documents ahead of time, so people can be ready. As far as the capital market expectations, again, this one seems a little not as specific as I think would be as useful as it could be. So is the intent that investment consultants and Mr. Polani are presenting the current market environment and the impacts of what we would expect over the next period? And then if we separate the investments, or is it just the current status of what's going on?
My thought on that, if we choose to separate tier one, tier two, we will have, we want to know how the funded status will become specifically to tier one and tier two. My expectation, if we really should we choose to separate the assets, I'm assuming at the base of the market condition, the tier one funded status go even worse. Could it be worse than what it currently? And then in that case, what do we want to do? This is the initial thoughts from my part. But I know when we have the funded status discussion, actually, CEO PM brought out this discussion. I think his intention of funded status was different because he felt like we're entering a down cycle of the economy, right?
At some point, I don't know when that's going to happen.
Yeah, and he wanted to have a discussion how that's going to be impact, how that the plan funding status is going to be impacted with the down cycle, a down economic cycle, and then, how worse is it going to be? What can we do? What is the worst, lowest funding status we can accept? So that's something, it is a jumbled item.
So might I suggest, I think we should pull off the separation of tier one, tier two funded implications. I think it's pretty safe to say that if the funded if we had two different trusts, tier two would be nearly 100% funded, and tier one would be less funded than it is. I think that's a pretty obvious thing. I would say if we could get, if the impending down market cycle, or current down market cycle at the beginning, whatever, what should we expect? And because I think that'd be very useful information to project to the city as far as a current study of what we expect over the next period, and what reactions would we see from staff as far as investment changes, if any. I think that's a pretty meaty topic in and of itself, and probably a good study. Is that, so we basically strike the last sentence off?
That's fine.
Is that
Yes.
clear enough? Is that, I think it gets both Makita and Fubu lined up. Establishing a process for developing and approving a board work plan, I think that's, I think I understand what you want there, but again, it's really to discuss, develop a process and timeline of when we would have work plan discussions, because right now we have budget process, we have review process and stuff, we have lots of things jumbled up, and I don't think it's really explicit as to when we should expect things. If you're developing a budget plan, you have work plans that align to it. Those things should all be kind of lined up and kind of tiered up earlier in the calendar year, so that by the beginning of fiscal year, you're firing away at it. Is that
Yes.
right? So it's really having that discussion. That's not a very long discussion, but I think if, perhaps this is purely coming from you, Mr. Pena, that really it's, if you had the keys to the kingdom, and you do, but if the board tells you, develop a work plan timeline of when you would be presenting what you want, what ORS should be doing, at what period, when does that happen? You come to us in December, so you know what clear direction you're pushing into the budget side, so you know that by June 1, or July 1, you're cooking on all cylinders on that work plan. What does that process look like for you as the leader of the group? Is that right?
Yes. I mean, it's just mindful that for every year, you have a budget process, you have administrative priorities, there's a decision-making process that you've got to bring the boards through in order for that, what you put out in the budget to coincide with what the boards want, and then it gives you time to implement with your team. How do we, what is the process, what's the calendar for all those things to come together, so that we have an agreed upon set of priorities beyond what's on every month's agenda.
All right. So just to make sure that I understand, you want to include a discussion item on the agenda that includes a suggested approach on how they're supposed to, what I would suggest the timeline is to get these work plans for discussion with the boards.
Right.
And I think what you're hearing is because there's a lot of folks that are going to be new to the board, or new to the process of doing this. We're going to have new trustees coming on soon enough. That really, it's what's this work plan development look like, and what's the process you want to bring it through, and then we can chat it through what we want to do. That work?
Sure.
Everybody good?
Yep.
Beefy enough agenda for next month, and doable to deliver. Okay, so that's item 5B. There's no real, we don't need to vote on this, it's just setting an agenda. So as far as description there, so no vote on item 5B. 5C is time certain for 13 minutes from now, so I got to hustle because the PNF staff is at the board, is already joining us here, so that's held till 11:30. We're on to 6A, this is oral update from the CEO, Mr. Pena.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just quickly, the external auditors from Grant Thornton will be back starting on August 26th for at least a month to continue working on the annual financial audit. And the new account clerk for the accounting function will start on September 23rd. Under the benefits area, we have 3 positions right now that are open. We have a senior analyst, which we are going to be interviewing for tomorrow. The front desk position is actually open right now, and we just recently had a benefit analyst that moved to another department, so we are going to be running a search for that position in the near future. In terms of your board,
Mr. Peña,
yes.
3 out of how many on the benefit side?
I think we are about 10 or 12 positions on the benefit side, but we have about 4 benefit analysts, so we're down. Benefit analysts, we're down 1, and then senior, we have 2 positions, so we're down 1 as well. As you are well aware, your board is actually short 2 trustees, and the city clerk was actually running an application process for the 2 seats. That application process ended on August 2nd. We received 4 applications. However, one of them did not qualify because they did not meet the 50-mile radius. I think it was 50.2 miles. But in any case, so 3 of them will move forward. As the chair reminded me this morning, one of those positions, I always forget if it's the 3rd or the 7th, it requires that your board actually do an interview. So we're going to be working with the city clerk. The city clerk is working on bringing to the city council interviews for one of those positions on August 27th. Presumably the way it will work is the city council will make an appointment of one of those 3 members, and then the other 2 will come before your board, most likely for the October meeting for interview, so that you can interview the other 2 members, and then recommend back to city council one of those members for appointment for your November meeting. You receive this week the non-conflict of interest form. So when you get a chance, if you can fill that out and send it back to staff. A letter was sent out to retirees last June because we made some changes to the pay portion of their paycheck. Some small changes on the pay stubs, and so I think it was well received. We are working with the city on the steps for making sure that your investment professionals that are currently on the tier 3 actually are able to join CalPERS defined benefit plan. I think the city has a goal to bring forward a recommendation to city council at the August 27th meeting, and the idea is to hopefully sometime in October to kick off the process to have those members sign up for the CalPERS benefit. And lastly, 2 things. We had interviews for the IT manager position. As you recall, our new deputy director, that was an old position, IT manager, and so we are down to 2 members, and I think we're actually going through the process of checking references. And lastly, it was about 5 years ago that we actually made changes to our offices and the building. The rent lease agreement is coming up in March of 2020, and so I'm working with staff and looking at different options, which include anywhere from remaining in this building to looking at other locations nearby in other buildings in the area. We're going to be coming forward to your board at the meeting in October to give you an update as to where we stand and what we will be recommending. That concludes my comments, Mr. Chair.
Healthy comments. Any comments or questions? Okay. None? All right, thank you. We're going, that's item 6A, on to 6B. This is the oral update from the council liaison.
Yes, just want to make sure that the retirement boards are aware that PG&E has issued a public safety power shutoff notice. Basically what it means is PG&E, at their discretion, can shut off the power whenever they feel like it, if they determine that there is danger of a wildfire because of their lines. This could affect San Jose and many parts of San Jose, and once they shut off the power, it will likely be off anywhere from 3 to 5 days, so longer than 48 hours. This prompted our mayor to ask for a study session on energy resiliency, which we will be having on August 29th, and that will be in the morning on August 29th He was also in Sacramento yesterday testifying before the legislature and asking for an oversight process so that there was some public accountability rather than someone, executives that are beholden to shareholders as opposed to the public. So that's something that we're very concerned about and really trying to take steps to make sure that our emergency services are able to handle what will happen, because there will be more emergencies, medical emergencies, in the event of shut off because of all the people who are on, have medical devices that they need every day. So we're concerned about that and we're working on that.
Okay. Any questions for Councilmember Davis? Okay, thank you. On to item 6, that's item 6B. On to item 6C, discussion and action on the appropriate response to the County of Santa Clara Civil Grand Jury Report. Besides, give it all to Mr. Alonzo, have him do it for us. What would, so, do we have a comment, or do you want me to comment?
No, I just was going to kick it up, but I think no one can comment better than you. You have a lot of experience working with the grand jury. You all received copies of the grand jury report. Last June, you should know that the city actually requested the grand jury an extension on the 90-day, which actually happens to be, I believe, the 90 days September 17, which is 2 days before your retreat meeting on September 19th. That request was actually granted, and I was working with Cheryl, and I confirmed that that request included the retirement boards. Of course, that does not mean that we have to respond October 1st. I think the extension was granted through October 1st. Is that correct? So that's the new day that we have to respond to, October 1st. And I think the key issue here is they're very specific. I think there are 5 recommendations, 4 which are 5 related to retirement, 4 which are asking for something to be done by June 30th, 2019 and 2020, and 1 by December 31st, 2019. I think in terms of actually working a response, it should be very straightforward. Basically, whether or not the boards agree with the recommendation. If we agree or do not agree, explain why and what we're going to do about it. So if in essence you board agree with the recommendations, then yes, we agree and we intend to have, recommended steps to be completed by the due date that the grand jury recommended or requested. And if we do not agree, then the reasons why not. I can speak that the Police and Fire Board, I believe, and staff, correct me if I'm mistaken, the Police and Fire Board granted, I believe, their chair the ability to work with whoever is the appointed person for Federated and the CEO and CIO, so that we can work on the responses a little quicker rather than setting up a committee so that we can meet the deadline. That was Police and Fire approach. So I'll turn it over to the chair now.
So what I was going to say is I communicated to Mr. Sinceri on the Police and Fire Board and asked him that I think the most efficient path is for, if we can get the 2 boards to delegate their chairs, whoever, to coordinate a response saying that we understand what's being asked of us, and then that we'll action it at an appropriate time, and that we'll provide a written response timely to what the request is. Obviously, some of these things have longer time frames. The city has a response that they need to provide as well to their specific things. My ask is that you, we're not going to work out what we agree, disagree necessarily, but what our action plan around the recommendations would be in the response, the process that we would not, we like this, we're going to do it. It's this is the process by when we would do something. So, Measure.
Hi, Cheryl Parkman, Office of Employee Relations. I'm just here to request that the city and the retirement board do coordinate on the responses. There are some responses that do overlap. I believe questions 3 or findings and recommendations 3 and 4. I made the same kind of comment to the Police and Fire Board 2 weeks ago, so just wanted to bring that up here at the Federated Board.
It's very kind. I'm glad to work together as a big happy team. I didn't actually want the extension. I want our response as quick as we can and get it over with, because I don't see any value for us to wait longer, just because it's really, because then it shortens our time clock if we agree to their timeline. I'd rather not shorten our time, because, for example, the one that, if we find that their December 31, 2019 turnaround on one of the recommendations is agreeable to us, that shortens our timeline to actually do something. That's the reason why I wanted a quick response. Whether the city can respond before the October 1st or not, I don't know what the timeline, getting this in front of council to decide how to respond. Is that on the agenda already?
It is on the September 17th council agenda, so that is our plan of how we will be taking it to city council for approval.
Okay. Any comments or thoughts or questions on these?
Not that you need more work, Mr. Chair, but it would be helpful if they also, if your board nominate you to work with the chair for police and fire and myself and the city to coordinate the action plan and responses.
Make a motion myself to do something?
No, yeah, I would just a recommendation to your board.
Is that what you would like to do?
That sounds good to me, too.
I'll make a motion that the chair of the board coordinates with the chair of the police and fire board and the city in the response to the civil grand jury.
Second.
Motion is by myself, second by, we'll give it to
Everybody
Councilor
else.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Thanks. On to item 6D, discussion action on the proposed annual member statement for classified members of Tier 2 to the Tier 1 to be prepared by the board's actuary. I do.
Go ahead.
Hi, this is an item that the city is requesting, so as you know, we do have some employees that changed membership recently from Tier 2 to Tier 1, based on their previous membership in Tier 1. The request before you today is that you do request Chiron to provide these members with an annual statement. We believe this will be helpful to the members because they will know how much they have to pay back, and be helpful to Chiron so they don't have to continue to do random calculations whenever somebody leaves, because they do need to find out what that payback amount is. So it's easier for them to just piggyback on whatever the last year's statement was.
And on behalf of the Office of Retirement Services, we completely agree with the city request. We reach out to Bill Hallmark. The initial setup cost per plan is about $1,500 to $2,000. And there are actually about 40 federated members that are impacted by this reclassification of Tier 2 to Tier 1. And so it will probably cost on the vicinity of $2,500 to $3,500 a year combined for all the 40 members to prepare these statements. And I in complete support of it. And I was recommended to your board to approve the request.
Comments, questions? I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Approval by trustee Chandra, second by trustee Castellano. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. That was item 6D, my apologies. So 6E is E, F, and G are all time certain for 11:30. I know I'm 1 minute late. If I could beg the indulgence of police and fire, I've got maybe 3 more minutes on the committee reports, and then we'll be on to you. So on to item 7-1A, oral update from the chair of the investment committee. We haven't met since May. We're meeting later this
Yeah.
month.
No update.
No update.
Yeah.
Great update.
Easy update.
Yeah. 7.2A, oral update from the chair of the governance committee.
Ms. Orr is not in attendance today, but the committee is scheduled to meet jointly with police and fire after the September 5th meeting.
Great. That was 7A. 7.2A, 7.3, we're meeting in just a moment with the chief of the police and fire. Item 7.4, this is the joint personnel committee. Item 7.4A, I'm listed as first, but I think you're actually the vice chair of the committee. Mr. Chandra, do you want to give any update of our last meeting that happened a week or two ago?
Yeah, the most important update is that the JPC got together with Cortex, our consultant, to come up with our own independent procedures and policies for reviewing CEO and the CEO and the CIO.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Chandra? All right, that was 7.4A. On to 7.4B, that's the minutes from Feb 20, 2019, receive and file. Nothing there. On 8A, B, and and C are listed of programs and trainings for receiving and filing those. Any future agenda items? Usually verbose. Any public or retiree comments? Seeing none, we're not adjourned. I'm going to call a recess for 5 minutes while we get the police and fire folks lined up, and then we'll get on to our joint meeting with their audit committee. So 5-minute recess. We ready to record?
Yes.
Okay, we're back from recess from the Federated Board. We'll also join and concurrently hold the Police and Fire Audit Committee. So, Mr. Alonso?
Let me call to order the Police and Fire Audit Committee and note that the Chairman, Drew Lanz, is here, our Vice Chair, Frank Abado, is in attendance, and Eswar Menon, our third trustee, is also in attendance.
Excellent, thank you. And I appreciate your accommodating our challenge to meet with you in this way. Hopefully we can still get through all our items and get things done.
It might be actually a really handy way to do it in the future, too, so we're in.
Okay, get it going. So what we have in our agenda item, I believe, I don't know how yours is ordered, we have this item 5A, which is the update on the pension administration.
That's our first item, too.
Implementation project. So we'll start there, and I believe get back at it.
Hi, yes, Barbara Heyman, Deputy Director for ORS. In front of you today is a memo giving you an update on the Pension Administration System project. We meet with the Audit Committee quarterly and give this report. And today I have with me Sue Ziegler, who is from Eller Wexler, and she is the ORS Implementation Oversight Manager, and she's going to be bringing you through the presentation for today.
Thank you.
Hi, so today.
Before you do, you're going to go to the actual PowerPoint, right?
Yes.
So I want to ask the board or the committee, are there any questions about the actual 3-page memo? No, okay, very good.
Okay, so we'll go through the slides.
We might, I'd like to have the presentation first. I might preserve that, won't have questions later. So.
Okay. Today we're going to talk primarily about the remaining project items, which are Member Direct, which is a website for the members, and Measure F. Slide 2. The current project status is that officially the main pension administration implementation project is completed. There are the 2 remaining items that are still being worked. We transitioned to support.
Hold on just 1 second, sorry. The camera is actually trying to see the screen, so when you turn it, they're not actually seeing the screen. So maybe somewhere in between where it was and where it is. There you go. Thank you. Back on track, fire away.
Okay. We're now in support as of August 1st for all the functionality that was delivered by February 1st, which was the end of the parallel processing period. Slide 3, the status of the remaining work. Member Direct. Currently, the vendor's making changes as a result of the items found during user acceptance testing. We're targeting the end of August for Member Direct to be ready to go live. What that means is, once it's moved into production, we're going to do a soft launch. We're going to ask the ORS staff and retired annuitants that are working, they'll be invited to log into Member Direct, enroll and log in and use the system. Once that is successfully completed, ORS will invite the retirees to enroll. This will take place no later than October 1st, but could be earlier depending on how the soft launch goes and the communication to the retirees. Active members will be invited later in the year, probably in early December. Any questions about Member Direct? Okay, Measure F. Benefit calc. Since this slide was produced, the vendors indicated that the fixes for this will be in 2 parts. They're going to deliver the first part, will be in production August 30th, and the remaining items for the benefit calc fixes are not yet, it hasn't been determined when they'll be delivered. They just have not had time to estimate them yet. COLA for Measure F will go in October, and Guaranteed Purchasing Power in lieu health will go in December. Next slide 4. This is just a chart
of the dates that I talked about on the previous slide. And of course, due to the recent decision to split the benefit calcs, that line item's not on this chart. Next slide. What was accomplished since May? The testers were trained in Member Direct, and of course, the testing occurred. For control sheets, we've had limited progress this period. The retired annuitant that came back to help has been out on an injury. She's expected to come back. The other retired annuitants that are here to help us on the project have been very busy with other testing and other ORS business. Measure F, benefit calcs testing was done, and it's still going on. COLA is ready to be released for user acceptance testing. GPP and in lieu is the vendors doing systems testing. Problem incident reports, we continue to report, fix, and retest issues. It's an ongoing process. In addition, ORS got trained in ad hoc reporting, development, and maintenance. Next slide, 6. During the next 90 days, we will have the soft launch of Member Direct, and for the employees and the retired annuitants. And also the retirees will be invited within the next 90 days. For Measure F, both benefit calcs and COLA will have passed user acceptance testing and be moved to production. And the last phase of Measure F GPP, user acceptance testing should be nearly complete in 90 days. So we're in good shape there. Next slide, 7. This is the budget. The first two sections of the slide are, the first two portions don't change. Those are the budget numbers. The last section, the bottom section, the only thing that's changed since the last report is the amount of change requests went up from 136 to 176. So there's about 753,000 left in that budget at this point. Next slide shows the LRWL and the hosting budget, INETU. These charts show what was originally budgeted and what's been paid to date. I just want to point out the money in the LRWL budget is a little over 7 months of work left that could happen. It could take us through February and March if necessary. The contract ends in the end of March, so we're hoping not to go all that time, but it's there if we need to. Next slide shows the LRS, the project implementation, hosting budget, and payments. There's still a couple payments that are due to LRS. We're in discussions with them now on final sign-off. There's the warranty payment of the remainder of the holdback and the change request balance. So as soon as we finish the discussions on acceptance, those will be paid. The last slide just shows the LRW budget, that actual and, or budgeted and actual, and we're right on track for that. So, do you have questions?
Questions, are there? Comments? Showing good progress, showing great progress so far, and these final pieces are going to be great adds and great improvements.
Great. That's it. Okay,
Seeing
thank
none?
you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's the end of item 5C on the Federated. On item 6E on the Federated, that's the approve the minutes of the May 16th, 2019 Joint Audit Committee for the Federated City Employees Retirement System and Police and Fire Retirement Plan. So on the Federated side, is there a motion to approve those minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
On the police and fire side, our consent calendar includes the minutes of the meeting of May 16th and also approval of the April to June quarterly travel and attendance analysis. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve that consent calendar.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great.
Okay, so I'll have to take up item 6F. That is our approval for the same quarterly travel and attendance. That's 6F, so it's approval of April 1 to 6/30/2019 quarterly travel and attendance for Federated. Is there a motion on that?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thanks. On to item 6G on the Federated agenda, that's the discussion and action on the internal audit charter and the internal audit plan for 2019 to 2024.
And that's the last item on our agenda as well, Matt.
Yeah, so let me kick off the discussion, Mr. Chair, both chairs. Before you is Alain Malari. He's our senior internal auditor. If you recognize him, is because before he was our senior internal auditor, he was our financial analyst in the investment group. And so I'm very thankful the investment group was willing to let him move to this other area. He's here this morning to present to you both the internal audit charter and internal audit plan. I'm very excited about the plan, and as you recall, this position was approved by both of you boards about 3 years ago, but we had never really implemented the work of the internal audit plan because a couple of reasons. The main reason is because we have been working on the project over 2 years on the repayments of the benefits from the pensionables earnings project, and also because we have had some changes in that position over time. And so it's with great pleasure that I present to you Alain, and I'll turn it over to Alain to present both the internal audit charter and the internal audit plan, which by the way is quite different than the one was presented to you about 3 or 4 years ago. Alain?
Good morning, trustees. So by introduction, I am Alain Malyari. So previously I worked as a financial analyst in the investments division, but now I took the role as the senior internal auditor. So to start, for the memorandum for the internal audit charter, so this memorandum, as you can see, are in your iPads as well. So this just summarizes the importance or the need to have an internal audit charter before we proceed with actual audit activities. So the internal audit charter is a formal document that sets out the internal audit's purpose, authority, responsibility, and position within the organization. So it sets out the nature of the services, including the expectations and limitations of the services that the internal audit will provide, and how the internal audit will help in help the department to succeed in fulfilling its mission. So as I've said earlier, this charter is important to put into place before the actual audit activities or services to be provided, so there will be a clear understanding of the role itself, which we will discuss later on with the actual internal audit charter. And also, this is also to serve as, a service level agreement to avoid some confusions regarding to like potential confusion, I guess, and questions, especially with access to sensitive data, especially like benefit records and payroll information. So at the end of the discussion, then I'm proposing to adopt the internal audit charter. So if you have questions with the actual memo.
Seeing none, go ahead.
So so let's proceed with the actual internal audit charter. So I'll go through each section very briefly, but feel free to interrupt me if you have any comments or questions or any clarifications. So for the first part, page 2 is the introduction. So introduction basically just indicates what the internal audit charter is, which I've already discussed earlier. It also indicates here that this charter is to be reviewed once every 3 years, just to keep all the information up to date with the internal audit standards, and also to make sure it stays relevant to the needs of ORS. The second part is purpose and mission. So as the heading says, it describes the purpose and mission of the internal audit function. So the purpose of internal audit is to provide an independent, objective assurance and consulting activity designed to add value and improve ORS's operations. So consistent with its purpose, its mission is to help the organization to succeed in fulfilling its objectives by providing valuable insights and advice to improve the organizational processes, risk management, which may include financial, operational, compliance, or strategic risk, as well as internal controls. And the next section would be the scope of work, So as for the scope of work, internal audit scope encompasses, but it's not limited to providing or in evaluating and in the evaluation and examination of the adequacy and effectiveness of organizational processes, governance, internal controls, but it also includes the quality of performance in carrying out the responsibilities in order to achieve the stated goals and objectives of the department. So basically, it includes both assurance and consulting services, which it's also defined in the internal audit charter. The main difference lies in the ultimate objective. So assurance, it is a service wherein you express an opinion or a conclusion about an assertion based on the evidence you gathered and independently examined, while consulting services focuses more on improving the operations. But this doesn't mean that in the internal audit services to be provided or the audit projects, upcoming audit projects in the next 5 years, it would just tackle one or the other. It's not mutually exclusive, so in one project you can have both. So I think as an example, let's say you have a project, let's say to ensure that all cash disbursements are recorded accurately. So the objective itself is under assurance per se, but along the way there may be consulting services as well, because you may come up with a conclusion that yes, the cash disbursements are recorded accurately, but there are lacking controls. There are missing controls, which for now, yet it did not affect what is recorded. It is correct, but there could be potential errors in the future. So this is where consulting services comes into place. So as part of the project, you can draft and recommend internal control policies along the way. So, any questions
No,
so far?
I only have one comment. We're going to lose quorum in about 10 minutes on the Federated side. So I might recommend a very high-level presentation if there's any conversation on either one of these plans that we need to approve and the charter we need to approve, so that we can actually vote on them. Otherwise, we'll wait.
Oh, okay.
High level for the next few minutes on both of those, and then we can ask any questions. How about that?
Yeah, sure.
So if I may recommend, something like responsibility is probably a good item to address. And the independence and objectivity on your charter may also be good, and any other item that you think is important, that obviously I leave it up to you. And then after that, if they don't have any questions, we can move to the plan.
Okay, got it. So for I think I'll focus on authority first. So this summarizes what is authorized and what is not. So I'd just like to highlight some of the items here. So the first item is have unrestricted access to all functions, records, property, and personal within the law. So this includes any sensitive or highly confidential information, but rest assured that confidentiality will always be maintained, and the access would just be a read-only access. So I cannot delete or edit or any change information within the system. And then the fourth one, have full and free access to audit committee and the board. So we have like quarterly meetings for the audit committee and then monthly meetings for the board. So, but there will be instances wherein I would have to connect with you guys through emails and conference calls. And then the last thing that I'd like to point in this section is what is not authorized to do by the Internal Audit Division. So basically, to summarize it, IAD cannot perform operational responsibilities and is not responsible for any company activities as required by the independent standards. We can advise on how to do the work, to execute it properly, but we cannot do the actual work itself. So for responsibility, I will not go through all of them, or I will not go through any of them, but if you have any questions regarding that, please go ahead. But I'd just like to point out that the board and the management still has the ultimate responsibility in setting the direction and setting the policies in terms of like risk management, governance, and internal controls. So internal audit will just be an aid to that. So then the last one that I would probably for independence and objectivity. So yeah, it just requires that the audit would maintain independence and objectivity at all times. So act with integrity and ensure that you exercise professional skepticism and professional judgment.
I just want to add, in terms of independence, he reports to me in terms of administrative purposes, and certainly I work with him in the audit plan that he developed. But he has direct access to the audit committee members and the audit committee chair, which is critical to provide that he has independence, right? That he can actually access the committee without having to deal with management.
Yeah, so what Roberto said is also discussed in the organization section, so, yep. And then I think that's the last thing that I would, I think one of the last thing that's probably one of the most important things here in the internal audit charter. So, yeah, so for the approval, if it's going to be approved today, then we're gonna have the date on the charter history, and then I'm gonna have to put some signature lines. So me, Roberto, the CEO, and the audit committee chairs for both plans would have to sign. So if you have any questions regarding any of the sections here, then.
Any questions?
Comment?
Sure, please.
For clarification, under, this goes to the independence point, under H organization, this correctly states that IAD will report functionally to audit committees, administratively to the CEO. If we go back to the accountability, section F, those are all functional, those bullet points. I don't think that this should say shall be accountable to the audit committee of the board and designated senior management for those functions. Those senior management should not be overseeing those functions to maintain the independence. So I would recommend striking and designated senior management from that section F to make that consistent with section H.
Yeah, that should be fine, but from time to time, I will also be reporting, not reporting itself, but I'll be also be taking into consideration comments of the management for the audit plan and the audit results and the recommendations, because I have to make sure that like the recommendations and the findings are communicated properly to the whole division as well.
Well, that's
So,
different than accountable too,
Yeah.
and I think that's what Mr.
Yep.
Herman's indicating, is that.
We expect you to be talking to everybody, that's how
Yeah.
good office works.
Right.
yeah, but definitely I can take that on. Yeah.
But you wouldn't be accountable to senior management for those 4 bullet points?
Yeah, exactly. So I'll
We
take
will
that
strike
on.
it.
So.
Okay.
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 Thank you, Council.
Other comments or questions?
Is it okay to ask a question of the actual 5-year plan?
I
No, no,
don't-
We're gonna go there now to the
Okay,
final.
good, that's what I thought, so I'll hold the question until we do the 5-year.
Let's kick off the 5-year plan, then we'll, and Fed side will vote at
Okay.
12:05.
Okay.
Not that I'm structuring it or anything.
No.
Go ahead with the 5-year, with
Yeah,
the.
so let's go through the 5-year internal audit plan. So in the memo, you can actually see the audit projects that we can audit in the next 5 years, the summary of it. It's based on the planning, the risk assessments procedures that I performed in the past few months. So it covers key risk areas, and I took it into consideration management concerns, requests, and also resource availability, because as you know, this role is just a one-man team currently for now. So I took into consideration that one as well. So the details of the plan can be found in the actual internal audit plan. So yeah, so it's, I'll skip with the background and the objectives because I already discussed that earlier in the third audit chapter. So on page 3, you can see some sort of a diagram. It is like the general approach in planning the audit. So the first step is like understanding the business. So basically it's the information gathering and scoping process. So obtain an understanding of how the department generally works. And I consider some external and internal factors surrounding the plan, such as the laws and regulations like municipal codes, standards as well, and things like that. And mainly, of course, for the internal is the mission of the plan itself. Then the risk assessment process, I'll just discuss this in more detail later on. Then the next is the audit plan development. So based on the first two steps, I developed a plan covering each division within the department, and then communication, I took it to senior management, and then now for the board for approval. And then on page 4, you can see it's just a visual representation of the audit risk universe within the department. So as you can see, ORS is segregated into 5 divisions, like accounting, benefits, IT, general administration, and investments. Each of them may be subject to risk. It may be like compliance risk, financial risk, operational, and strategic risk. So for the actual risk assessment process, so in identifying the risk, I sketch an audit universe, which is the sum of the auditable units. So these auditable units, as I've discussed earlier, is of the 5 divisions within the department. So I identified auditable processes within each unit or each division by interviewing personnel, mostly key management personnel, so that and I also read some documented policies and procedures that's already currently in place, so I can know what are the processes and what processes can be auditable. So in each process, I also identified risk areas and certain risks that are within the process. So analysis, so in analyzing and determining the overall risk identified in each process, I consider both inherent risk and control risk. So inherent risk is the risk wherein it's the risk that is present due to the nature of the process, while control risk is the risk of like lacking or missing internal controls. So based off that, I determined 8 inherent risk factors and weighted them accordingly based on the significance and consequence that each has on the organization. So the inherent risk factors are financial impact, complexity of activities, degree of automation, volume of transactions, extent of change and stability, compliance to rules and regulations, reputational sensitivity, and time since last audit. So in actually scoring or to measure the inherent and control risk factors, I developed a scoring scale, which you can see on page 7. So each process is scored individually based on the inherent risk factors and control risk factors. So I just want to point out that the whole risk assessment process involves subjective decisions in each stage, including the scoring itself. So it is based on the information I gathered throughout the planning and, of course, based on professional judgments as well. So on page 8 to 10, it shows the risk assessment matrix that summarizes the auditable processes in all divisions and the risk scores associated with it. So average risk score is the average score of the inherent risk, which is impacted by magnitude of impact and likelihood. So weighted score is just the average score times the weight. Like for example, the weight for financial materiality is 20%. So it's average score times 20%. And then the inherent risk score, it's just the sum of all the inherent risk factors, inherent risk weighted scores, I mean.
Can I jump in? Can I jump in? Mr. Alonso, would you like to ask your questions?
Hey, we're at that point now?
Yeah, it's 12:05.
Would you rather
We're
take-
leaving at 12:10.
Would you rather take the vote now and then follow on with questions?
Well, unless the questions are useful to Mr. Chandra to make a decision if he wants to.
No, I think these are mostly just detailed questions I want to ask. It's an excellent presentation. It's
Yeah, that's why I don't want to cut off we can continue the conversation, we just lose our ability to vote in a few minutes.
Would you like me to make a motion on the police side? Matt, would you like me to kick it off?
Sure.
I move that we approve the internal audit charter, noting deleting the phrase under item F, designated senior management per Councilor Liederman's suggestion. That's my motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the police and fire side? If not, all in favor? Aye? That's good. Passes.
Okay. I'll make a motion on the Federated side, exactly the same as Mr. Alonso's, striking that language for Mr. Liederman's comments. Approve both the charter and the plan. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Castellano. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And
So just to be clear, your motion approved both, their motion just approved the charter for now.
Right.
You just mentioned the charter.
Yeah, would you like me to approve also the
No,
actual
I
five-year
just,
plan?
I thought you did it on purpose, I just wanted to make sure that
Yeah,
there
well,
was
they're
a
two different
distinction.
documents, so I thought it'd be two different motions.
They don't have to be, but I wanted
Okay.
to know that there was two different motions.
Yeah.
so-
I approve that and the plan.
Okay, then let me make a motion that we also approve the actual five-year internal audit plan. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Great.
Thank you. I just
I'm used to
wanted-
doing these things once.
You're fine. So
Thank
we're
you.
gonna keep going probably for a
Yeah.
few more minutes and
Yeah.
then ask questions and then we'll actually adjourn. So Fed's not adjourned yet, so we'll fire away.
Yeah. Let me ask you, so first of all, Elaine, this is top-notch work, and I really love this stuff. I've chaired many audit committees. So you haven't been able to really dig in yet, you will in the future, on the control risk score. They're all just scored as 3 right now until you get better. So let me ask you to bring something back. I don't know, maybe it'd be a year. It takes a long time to really go through this. What I'm used to seeing is this kind of table as a chart. And along one axis is what's important, right? And that's sort of your inherent risk. And along the other axis is sort of how are we doing? That's sort of your control risk.
Yes.
Right, that kind of chart. And out there are these little red dots that say, this is really important and we're not doing a very good job. And I'm used to, so this is top-notch work, because I'm used to seeing this in that kind of chart. And although it's not perfect as a way to do it, and then the audit committee is kind of constantly beating back those red dots, trying to get them down to 2s and 3s. It's not ideal, because there's 1,000 factors, and to some extent it's subjective, and you might say, I know that red dot is the one that's farthest out there, but actually this little yellow dot here, that really matters, right? It doesn't quite get captured in numbers. So you will fill out the control risk scores and generate that chart for us whenever you have all the data, right?
Yeah, so basically, for the internal, as, I'd actually like to mention that. Like,
Sure.
Yeah, so for the control risk scores, so it's all rated as 3 for now. It is because it is based on the assumption that there is internal controls.
Right.
But we don't have enough evidence to conclude its proper implementation and effectiveness.
Yeah, it's a lot of
So
work.
the test of controls will be done in the actual audit execution.
Right.
And then the risk reassessment will be made and then will then be considered in future audits.
Yeah, that's the way I'm used to seeing it, now you're doing it right, yeah. That was the only question I had when I read it. It's really top-notch work.
I gotta tell you, you probably, most of you know that my first 10 years in professionally, I was working in internal audit. I thought that was top-notch work. I was very excited.
Yeah.
I wish we had more time to discuss it because I think it's great work. And I'm really looking for the work of Elaine in the office. I think it's really getting to the meat of it as to, hopefully what would that do is now we've been sort of reactive and having this function with someone that have that skill set will probably help us be more proactive, which is really the key, right? I mean, that's what we want to get to, so.
I could not echo that more, Roberto. I think 80% of the companies I sit on, the firefighters, oh shoot, audit, oh shoot. And the really good ones do what you're doing, Elaine, and they get ahead of that. They're proactive, absolutely right. And I think that this kind of chart is as good a way as any to get at it. It's not perfect, but when you see a dot out, if this matters, and we don't have it under control, then that's how we proact, right? Then let's be on that for a
And
while.
again, I can't emphasize enough how critical and important it is for me that he has direct access to the audit committee.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I want him to be comfortable, I want the committees to be comfortable and the boards to be comfortable, not only because, it was my background when I started professionally, but also because I believe wholeheartedly that for him to get the job done, he needs to have that direct access to the committees, so.
Well, Elaine, if we see you every quarter, and what you're sort of showing us is that red, yellow, green dot of this, as you fill it in, as you learn, that's an excellent way for us to track how you're making progress. And also, in the beginning, maybe you pick one out, each meeting say, there's a red dot there, and we can actually start tackling those.
Yeah, definitely.
Elaine, how did you schedule what you do in year 1 versus year 2 versus year 3 or 4?
Oh, so for that one, so aside from the risk assessment procedure that was performed, so basically there's like priority, like you prioritize, like mostly in the early years, you prioritize those that are riskier than the others. And then aside from that, one of the major one of the major, like the reason in like putting this like put together in like what certain year, it's because of the mission of the department itself. So as you can like see, or if you have noticed, the auditable processes or audit activities in the benefits side of the department is scheduled in the early years. That is because our department's mission is centered in providing services to the members. So that's the major part as well. And then last thing is the resource allocations and resource availability. So I actually kind of like manage like the planned hours, right? So I actually just thought of like saying this specific job, this specific audit process would take a long time. This wouldn't take much long time. So I kind of like balance it out throughout the 5 years as well. And since like as what I've mentioned, this is a one-man team for now. So I kind of like took into consideration that piece as well. So.
And will every activity, every operation be audited once every 5 years, or some will be done?
No, so I just like to, good thing that you pointed out one out. So basically, initially for now, we have a 5-year internal audit plan, but that doesn't mean that there won't be any planning in the succeeding years, because planning is really a continual process, as well as the risk assessment part of it as you go on through the audit. So every year I will reassess the plan and just to check reassess the plan and to see if there are things that needs to be changed, or as I go through, let's say I audited this part already in the first year, I would verify if that needs to be audited in once every 5 years or once every 2 years. So I'll have the ability to set the frequency once I get to the audit project itself.
Thank you.
So.
Can I ask you to just take 2 examples? So under benefits, you have disability payments, you have a 5 score on the left. And then if you go up, you have a 1 for rehire retirees. What does that mean, the 5 and the 1?
The 5 and the 1, you can actually, that's actually just a scale of the scores. So on page, I believe it's page 7. Yeah, so you can see for the inherent risk factor, let's say for financial materiality, it is impacted by both impact and likelihood. So you analyze the risks within that process, and you ascertain, what is the impact of this if that risk would be, that risk would occur, and then the likelihood, so the likelihood of the risk as well. And then, and then you kind of like average that one, and then multiply it by the weighted score, which is on page 6.
So when you say it's a 1, it means that there's less likelihood of something going wrong?
Not that something is going on. It's the less likelihood that the inherent risk factor within that process will occur. So if it's less likely to occur, then it's scored accordingly. So.
And then when you have 5, what does that mean?
So when you have 5, sorry. So the general thing with this scoring is,
are these actual scores or hypothetical scores?
These are like subjective scores based on the scale that I actually developed. Okay. So 1 is actually less. 1 is actually the least risky, and then 5 is actually the riskiest one. So
it's risky because that step is important, or because of?
So let me see if I can jump in to help. You mentioned one of the 5 was the benefits, disability payments, right? That was 1? Yeah. So 5, and correct me if I'm mistaken, but at the end of the day, we're here to make sure that members get their payment timely and correctly.
So it's critical.
So it's critical, right? It's critical to our mission. Not only do we have to get you the payment timely, but it has to be right. So if you're entitled to 2,000 and we're sending you 4 or 1, that is catastrophic from the standpoint that we do a lot of stuff in here, but this is what we're here for. And that's why, I think that's what he's getting at.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Robert.
You're welcome. That's why you also see 5 on contribution rates. That's kind of basic in what we do. If we're not collecting the right contributions, that is a big issue for us.
Yeah,
So
I was
that's,
trying to clarify, it doesn't mean that the way we do things is creating risk, it actually means that the step is.
yes,
Yes.
yes.
It's always those two axes, it's how important is it and how are we doing? It's, and he's, I think Olin's come up with a very good way to take subjective information and somehow make it visual, which is hard to do.
And I can't emphasize, the subjectivity of it, because this is just to kick off, right? As he has a chance to be doing more work, he will be much better at providing that kind of feedback, obviously.
Okay,
No, great, I think first rate.
Great.
look forward to the work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna adjourn the Fed board. Thank you.
The Police Fire Audit Committee is also adjourned.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Elaine.